The Mayo Experience.
That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. That Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, presented by Underdog. We are back with the final bets for the Sentry. We got the weather for the Sentry, DraftKings picks, and one additional Underdog best ball draft before it locks at the beginning of the Sentry. It's still only 72% filled right now, $10 per entry, $50K to first place. And if you use code Mayo right now, you can get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $1,000. So you get that big deposit bonus, and you can just use that in order to play in the best ball league. So lock up the bonus money for all that time. Then you still have a ton of money on Underdog in order to dominate Pick'em for NFL over the course of the playoffs, or even just take advantage of Week 18. Who knows? A reminder to people out there, I'm running a brand new show on Friday. We are going live at 10:15 a.m. Eastern Time on Mayo Media Network. It'll be available on the podcast feed after the fact. It's going to be a three-banger. We're going to talk college football. We're going to be talking about round 2 golf bets and a recap of round 1 and NFL DK and prop bets and underdog plays for the weekend. We got 3 guests. It's going to be like an hour and a half long. Please come join us live, and you can ask some questions in the chat as well. Joining me for the first time on this show, Tampa will be back next week in studio, but he's not here this week. Eric Polzin is here from 9 to 5 Sports to break this down. I got to tell you, I enjoy the content, so I wanted to bring you on.
I appreciate that. It's a fun sport to cover, obviously, with this being kind of the kickoff of the season, being the first tournament of the season for 2025. But football's over with. We're going to get that golf crowd back that maybe wasn't there during the fall swing. So I'm more excited this year for the Sentry Tournament champion, or Sentry Tournament now, than I have been the last 2 years, really. I don't know if you feel the same way or not.
Yeah, I am, but just I really wish golf would start 3 weeks from now. Like, I'm happy it's back. I like talking about it. It's going to be great to throw on one of my other TVs during week 18. Like, oh, it looks so sunny there and so nice. When I look out my window and it's not covered in snow. It's just cold outside. Like, it's not Hawaii, put it that way. So it warms my heart to do it. But I've just had devastating loss after devastating loss at this tournament.
Yeah, early season, especially for the Sentry Tournament champions being, I'm going to keep going at that. Sorry, the Sentry Tournament, with it being a no-cut event and being the first event of the season, that's typically what happens. Just higher variance. The results are a little bit more random. Like Chris Kirk winning last year, I think is a perfect example of that. And that's the tough part about this. I always tell people we're kind of just dipping our toes into the water, feeling out the season. In a month from now, we'll have all the data points that we really need to be successful, but it's fun to have it back.
So when you're doing a data-driven type analysis like you do over at 9to5sports.com, and check Eric out on YouTube as well, where we have these data points, they're all like stale data points from ages ago, especially with all the top guys who just simply haven't played in a data-driven tournament that we can collect stats from. Like, you can call the hero like whatever. Like, that is a legit non-tournament with 18 guys in it.
Yeah.
Some of these guys have played throughout the swing season, and they've got these reps in, but even them, they haven't like played any real tournament in a month. Like, do you kind of have to go on gut feel? Like, do you let the stats guide you, but you kind of have to massage it yourself manually?
Yeah, it's definitely more kind of manual, whereas like in the middle of the season, I'll be definitely just trusting the data more so. But you kind of mentioned it. It's a tough part of the season, mostly like the hero. Like, a lot of people are on JT mostly because of his good finish at the hero. I really don't even look at the hero just because it's such a limited field event. And then, yes, we had that fall swing. It's like Max Graceman, a perfect example of someone that had a great fall swing. But like, is this going to be a chance for him to like catch his breath? Kind of a natural reset for those players that were really grinding out a fall swing, playing great golf. To me, that would be what it is to me, like a natural reset for those guys. Whereas the top end players, they're kind of easing themselves into the start of the season. And on top of that, we don't really know what's going on, maybe equipment wise, injury wise, with a lot of the top end guys. Like, did they make a swing change? Like, that's all information that we'll have probably a month and a half from now for a lot of these guys, but we just don't have that yet. And so those are all variables that we just don't have, and obviously that would influence maybe who we're going to be on.
I completely agree. I always find it funny that, like, when we found about the Fitzpatrick thing with the driver last year, when he had the weight in it for like 3 months and he didn't even know, but like that could have happened and no one could have told us at all. and we would just have all these stats that make no sense, and we'd be going off of them. Like, I guess that's the one part about data modeling. And listen, I go to fantasynational.com/Mayo, get 20% off all the data and all the tools. But sometimes it can be very misleading in that sense because we don't have, like with every other sport, we get the information like, oh, LeBron is dehydrated. He has a calf injury. He's not playing tonight, or he's going to play limited minutes. Maybe he doesn't even see the court, whatever it might be. You have everyone in football. Tua's hip is bad. Is he going to play? Is he not going to play? If he plays, expect him to be somewhat limited. We just have no idea with golfers. Like, they could be hungover going from one round to the other.
Yes.
So,
oh, that's the worst. A player coming in off of a victory, and you're like, was he drinking or was he not drinking? What type of person is he? Like, do we have to worry about the hangover effect or not?
Yeah, you have to figure out who's in his prayer circle, and then they can relay that information to you, and everything could be good. Few notes before we start about the field right now, player notes. Hovland has a broken toe, and he just split with Joe Mayo again, his swing coach. So I have no idea where Hovland's at right now. When we get to the DraftKings section, I think it's easy with these small field events to more or less talk about who we're not going to play at the beginning and then figure it out from there. Like, for me, Hovland's just a no-go.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. No sense of like really pushing it. Again, early season, he hasn't really played this course all that well as well. So there's really no reason to like risk him even at that price tag. There's maybe some players a little bit lower that are maybe have a little bit more upside and we don't have injury concerns that are kind of the same name value. So I'm right there with you. Really no reason to get there. Even on a contrarian standpoint, it doesn't really make sense to me.
Yeah, the other one I would go with is Finau, who's had to withdraw from tournaments all December, and then all of a sudden, when you can play in a tournament that guarantees you a gigantic payday, all of a sudden his knee is fine. Yeah, I'm not trusting that.
Yeah, he's right there with Victor Hovland. No real reason to go out of your way to roster. I mean, he's one good start here at this tournament over the past 4 years. I don't really see it there. And so that's kind of the interesting part is we're already crossing off two of the bigger name players in this field. You take out Scotty already, as well as Rory's not playing in this event. I think Tommy Fleetwood, Shane Lowry, those guys are both out as well. And so we already are very limited on the top end of who we're getting to. And it's kind of a simplified week in that manner.
Well, and then you have to figure out if you want to go stars and scrubs or you do want to go more balanced. But even trying to go more balanced, there are some very good plays in the low sevens and in the sixes this week that I don't know if we agree on which ones that you have to go to, but I think that you can definitely see that there's a lot of value down there in a no-cut event at a birdie fest where guys are going to score a ton.
Yeah, for me, typically speaking on these no-cut events, I'll phrase it as like a yes or no question, like what strategy should we be doing? I'll typically tell people just to do studs and duds. Don't even worry about kind of the middle of the field. I mean, obviously, grand scheme of things, you want to do that. But if it was a yes or no question, just do the studs and duds. Target the guys on the lower end. They're going to finish about the top 50%. There's a lot of golfers in this event specifically where it's going to be, a little bit of an easier scoring event that can really make up that difference. That can go out and get birdies that maybe might not finish as well, but they can go out and score to the point where it's really going to make up the difference between someone like, let's say, Victor Hovland, for example, to Jonathan Vegas. I kind of like this week. So like, I would rather just kind of do that where maybe Vegas doesn't finish the best, maybe 30th, but Hovland finishes 15th. Who really cares when you're getting that good value there?
Exactly. And even when you look at someone like Sungjae a year ago who led the field in birdies, like his DraftKings scoring was through the roof. He just happened to finish T5. Like you still needed to have Sungjae. And honestly, there are very few events where you can kind of look at it, be like, hey, at this event, if I can get, 3 guys inside the top 5 along with the winner, maybe another 2 guys inside the top 12 and have my last guy finish inside the top 25. Like that's going to be good enough to have you contending in the large field GPPs. Whereas this week, you're basically going to need 6 guys inside the top 8.
Yeah. Yep. And it really, obviously contest selection does matter here. If you're doing more, the bigger contest, maybe not as much single entry type stuff. Yes, you're going to need to nail the winner, and you're probably going to need to nail one of those mid-tier guys for sure that goes off. I think Graceman's going to be a popular name in that mix, but at the same time, if you're doing more of those single entry guys, yes, just having a guy that finishes top 25 on the lower end, that should be enough to get you there, and more limited field events, that could be enough to win you a GPP there as well.
Well, with the rust and a lot of the unknowns that we're talking about, I do think that this field being a no-cut, and I personally don't love no-cut events, especially from DraftKings purposes. Like trying to find sleepers who make the cut and actually finish well, I feel like is the one thing I'm still able to do relatively well. So give me a field of 130 guys, let me find 2 guys in the 6K range that I think are going to do well, bet on that, and then load up top and try to pick correctly there is more of an advantage for me versus most of the field, I think, whereas this is you're kind of mashing buttons and hoping you get the right combination of guys. But where we, like you said, studs and duds go with that route. But in a field like this, where we saw the field get expanded last year to include the top 50 in the FedEx Cup standings, you have a lot of these guys at the back end who are priced in the low 8s, like the Ben Ann's, the Robert McIntyres, the Russell Henleys. And after seeing the leaderboard last year, where really none of the favorites were anywhere near the top, Scotty ended up coming T5, but he was kind of out of it by the time that Sunday rolled around. You had Kirk, you had Spieth, you had Thigala, Bhatia was way up there until Sunday as well. Sung J M was another one. Eric Cole had a pretty good week. JT Poston, Brian Harmon. Like that type of player did so successful last year. Do you think that's going to be a theme going forward where a lot of these guys from the back end can actually compete and a lot of the stars take a step back early?
That's definitely the interesting thought process. And that's honestly been the toughest part I've had thus far this week in terms of like roster construction is the guys in that middle range are so appealing. You can find reasons to play them for sure. Whereas like we are probably going to get lucky with the upside of those players like JT Poston having like a top 10 finish last year, definitely random there. And you're going to need to be on some of those random performers. In terms of that being consistently the thing that happens here, I don't really think so. I think it's just kind of one of those random outlier type of events where it's the Sentry Tournament Champions. You're in Hawaii. If you're, and it's a no-cut event, guaranteed prize pool, like if you're not playing well, you might just not be as like grinding out shots here and there. It doesn't matter as much to these players. And so we still had a lot of the top end guys play well, maybe just not well enough. Like Xander played well, Patrick Cantlay played well, relatively speaking. Kyle Morikawa played pretty darn well, and Sungjae, played really well. And so those are some of the top name players. So I think the way of looking at it is we are going to have some of those random players that go out and do well that we really wouldn't be on. Like Chris Kirk was still pretty random as a winner last year, even though you probably could have found reasons to be on him. But as a whole, definitely more of a random winner.
I completely agree. And I just wonder if that carries forward now that the field is larger. Because before it would be just the pure champion. So you'd get your very elite players, your middle tier winners, and then like 10 guys who had absolutely no chance of winning in a field of 36. Like it was a lot easier for the big names to win a few years ago versus right now when you add in basically like the B+, B level players. Like I know Billy Horschel won last year, so he was going to be in the tournament either way. But that level of player, Russell Henley being another one, Brian Harmon being another one, even Ben Ann being another one. Like you never really had that level of player in this tournament before last season.
Well, yeah, and the talent level is like, again, with it being a lot of weeks and months off of these guys playing competitive golf, I do think the talent difference is reduced here in terms of like it mattering there. And so, yeah, I could see that being a trend that does continue. Like, let's say Brian Harmon, a guy that when he gets in contention can find himself like right around victory. I could see that being the case a little bit more so here because it is reduced there. I would say the difference in the talent, and there's just not as many big name guys in this field for sure. I mean, there's like really 4 really big name guys that, sure, if they're in contention to win, you do expect them to win. Other than that, the list is pretty open. I could list off like 20 golfers that I think could possibly win. And some of those guys in that mid-range are going to be some of those golfers. So if they're hot for the week, yeah, I think it could be the case. And kind of think about it mentally, like a lot of the top end golfers, they've made their money. That's not going to be as big of a thing for them. Whereas a lot of these golfers on the lower end kind of mentally going about the, Sunday being in contention, I could see them being a little bit more geared up to go out and play well and to get that money, but also to kind of secure that season for that player as well.
Yeah, you win this tournament, you win the signature event, especially for the guys that haven't qualified for any of them. That gets you in the Aon 5 swing mix to get back into the signature events. It'll get you a Masters invitation if you don't already have one for guys that won earlier in last season. So it does mean a lot, and you secure your tour card for so long, especially with the guys that hadn't won. Like Grazerman winning this would be huge for him in a lot of ways. So we'll talk about the outright bets, but I do need to tell you that the best bet you can make right now is joining the race for the Mayo Cup. $1 million guaranteed, $250 per entry. You can have up to 5 of them, and it's $100,000 to first place, $70,000 to second place. Everyone inside the top 12 this year in the Mayo Cup will be paid 5 figures at least. I mean, 6 figures for first prize. The next 11 people will be paid 5 figures. And I think it pays down to 690 places of the 4,500 people. I'm giving away a free entry on New Year's Day. If you buy an entry and you screenshot it to me on Twitter, on Instagram, or on the newsletter, just reply to that email. You will get into the draw for a free entry on New Year's Day and again on the Sony Open show. So it starts at the Sony Open. Jeff and I are doing our show on Monday. I will give away another entry for the screenshot giveaway on there, but you need to go buy your entry first. It's now half full, so it's starting to speed up very quickly. So you might want to get your entry now before it absolutely fills up. But if you don't have the $250 to afford to play in it for this year, then I am giving away one free entry that you don't need to buy one to do, but I do need your help on the other side of it. So you have to subscribe to Mayo Media Network on YouTube. That gives you 5 ballots into that draw. And if you subscribe, rate, and review the Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast on Apple or Spotify, set on auto downloads for me. That would be very, very helpful to me. Then you will get into another draw. I mean, there's more people in that draw, but you have a chance to do it for free. Do you do any one and done stuff? Like, can I urge you, Eric, to play in the one and done?
You don't need to. So you got me 2 years ago. Actually, I've finished pretty well over the past 2 seasons. Each year start off extremely slow, so don't let that be something that discourages people. Like, literally terrible. I think I had one made cut over the first 7 events. I ended up cashing pretty easily at the end of the year last year. And then 2 years ago, I think it was a top 50, 30 finish or so. So pretty good stuff there. I think there's a pretty big edge there right now. I don't like kind of sharing all the secrets there with the one and done, but it's pretty simple. Play the live golfers in the majors and you're pretty much good to go.
Yeah, play the good, save them for the elevated events and save them for majors, and then try to get lucky on some of the jabroni events. I think that I'm going to do a full, on Sunday when I do the research show for Sony, I'm going to have the one and done strategy along with that. But I think that the thing that people forget about with one and done is that like a T13 finish from some bad golfer means absolutely nothing. If your guys aren't finishing inside the top 3, it's like a miscut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I ended up having maybe 5 victories, but most of those were in those bigger events, those bigger payout events. So that was obviously the biggest difference maker.
Yeah, of course. So let's get to the outright bets for the week. I'll have the updated bets. I'm going to send out a newsletter on New Year's Day, slightly after this show gets released. So probably around like 11 a.m. Eastern time, around noon Eastern time, somewhere around there, if I see anything else or add a bet. But I got 4 outright bets for the Sentry right now. I didn't go to the very top of the board, and I missed out on the early numbers before Scotty and Rory withdrew because I didn't have DraftKings Sportsbook was the only place that had numbers up. I don't have access to DraftKings Sportsbook where I live, so I couldn't bet any of those numbers. But I still found 4 that I really liked. I got Sam Burns and Sahith Theegala both at 28-1. I bet on Nick Dunlap at 75-1, and I played Harry Hall 90-1 with a top 5 each way to go along with it. I feel like there are other names that I'm circling around that I do like. I like Sungjae. I like Wyndham Clark a lot this week. I like Grazerman a lot. I could see, Herman's number now kind of sucks, but someone from the very back end I could see going with as well. But those are the 4 that I have locked in right now. Who do you have?
So you did mention some players there that I kind of like for placement bets with like Theegala, with Harry Hall. I think those are going to be good placement bets. I don't know. I kind of have a tough time seeing them kind of win, but at the same time, again, it's a smaller field event. We could see that end up happening. The player that I'm kind of going with longer shot odds, 28-1, Corey Connors or so. It really depends on which site you're looking at. He kind of fits that mold of someone kind of like Chris Kirk last year. Again, I don't know if we need to be going in on that too much last year, but maybe it was a sign of things to come. And he's a player that, just historically speaking, over the past year and a half has been playing elite golf. The dude has made 30 straight cuts in a row, and we have seen him actually finish pretty upside or have those upside finishes pretty decent amount recently. It was a weird trend there where it was like he'd finish top 30, top 10, top 30, top 10. Now we can't really look at that this year, but that's a sign of a golfer that shows up ready to play every single event. And if he's someone that just finds himself into contention, I think this could be the event that he finally figures it out. Now, sure, we worry about the length of it a little bit, putting a little bit, but overall, he's just looking like a stellar play. I have him ranking out as about a top 15 staff as a whole. Really like the number that we're getting on him as well. To me, it's tough to find a golfer that's that solid of a golfer. Now, maybe we do worry about the spike, that upside, but I think it can be there this week there with Corey Connors. From there, I actually do like, I'm only doing 3 right now as it sits. I could get to Sam Burns. I could potentially get to Taylor Pendrith, maybe Sungjae. but I'm just going with the top end. I actually like the odds of Xander Schauffele at about 6.5 to 1 on BetMGM is the best odds I could find. And especially if I'm only betting 3 golfers, like I'm kind of okay with that. You take out those big name golfers. If he or the next golfer, Colin Morikawa, show up, I do think there's a better chance of those two winning because of those golfers not being out there. I'm a little bit surprised that we're actually not getting them at lower odds.
Xander up to 6 to 1 is the best I see. Actually, I think that's a pretty fair number on him right now, especially where he was. That's right around where he was pre-Scheffler being out. So he didn't really get affected by anything. Obviously, he's won here before. I worry about, Morikawa's loss here to Rahm 2 years ago, I feel like is one of the most devastating gambling losses I've ever taken, considering I think he was up by 8 strokes at one point on Sunday. I think he has scar tissue around here. And and we've seen it a few times now in these final rounds with Morikawa all last season. Like, you look at his results and they're all excellent. I love Colin, but there's something that happens to him on Sundays now that maybe this is the year he breaks out of it and gets back to that winning form, but he's having trouble on Sundays.
Yeah, but I would say, it is a new year. Again, new season. Like, it's the perfect mental reset for someone like Colin Morikawa that maybe had those Sunday struggles where, maybe he was finding reasons in his head to not hit the best shot possible. He did kind of have a weird season last year where it was a little bit more random of results. But to me, I kind of look at his most recent results. To me, he did figure something out, whether it was because of a change in his swing last year or whatnot. Again, mental reset, I think it's actually a good spot for him. To me, it's tough not to get there, given that course history, given how well he was playing up until that point. Again, we don't know exactly what these golfers are working on, but I'm kind of okay, to me, getting the second best golfer in the field at, over 10 to 1 odds.
Yeah, I mean, right now, like even like somewhere like CoolBet has him listed behind Justin Thomas on the odds board, which is kind of nice. JT soaking up everything in terms of the odds. No one really wants to play Morikawa. I mean, I don't need my arm twisted all that much to go bet Morikawa. I don't think that I'm going to get there. Me being a losing golf bettor is far more likely to bet like 3 absolute duds at the bottom of the board and try to get the placement points on them, something like that. Be it Adam Hadwin or Cam Davis, like one of those guys, and just hope they just have a huge putting week. But Morikawa's season really turned around last year, and like the reason that I think that he was so consistently competitive was he learned how to chip. Like, he was a bad to neutral around the green player for his career, and last year he was like one of the best.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember, there was like some stuff about like his swing. I forget which way he hits it right now, but it was like it was going left to right, and now it's going right to left again. I forget what exactly that was, but you just saw him play consistently better.
Yeah, he started playing a draw, and he was someone who always played a cut. And he really tried to play the draw, although we've seen the numbers really express themselves in his iron play. Like, it's still good, but he was basically the best iron player on earth for 2 years, and it's not that he's not close to that anymore. It's just we don't see those highs that we saw from that time.
Yeah, and well, this is a tournament that I'm actually really looking at, kind of that long iron type of game, pretty much 200 plus. This course kind of sets up well for a player like Colin Morikawa, like Sungjae Im with that. And so that's kind of another piece to it. That's actually one of the more strong kind of stats that I'm looking at individually. And so that's kind of why I'm elevating him as well. Now, looking at last year, not really as good as it had been, but I'm kind of expecting that to come back to more the mean throughout his career.
Yeah, so for me, like when I did the modeling on Fantasy National, and you can find I did the preview article. It's in my newsletter right now. I also posted my best ball strategy and the Sentry write-up as an article on Twitter. So if you guys are on Twitter, please go. It's pinned to my profile right now. Can you please go retweet that for me? I just want to see if I can get any traction writing the articles on Twitter. I mean, I would love if you would subscribe to the newsletter. It's completely free to go do, but that's another way that you can go find it. So I can see if I can try to bring some more people in to the mix doing the articles that way. But I just found that this is... We can try to parse it down to a lot, and I've really tried to overthink this tournament over time, but you kind of hit on it. The long approaches are going to be key because you have some of these longer holes that actually play a lot shorter on in reality than they do on paper because of elevation changes. A lot of the longer holes, except for I think number 17, play completely downhill. Like, guys are going to drive like 400 yards on number 18 and then have like 200 yards in on a par 5. But there's just so many wedges at this course. Like, this is truly a wedge and putting competition as long as you don't absolutely fuck up off the tee or with your long irons. Like, you can be passable there, but if you're hitting your wedges close and you're making putts, like, you're going to be there on Sunday.
What are kind of your thoughts on that though, with it being a wedge fest and putting fest? Because to me, I kind of look at that like I typically don't need to go on a golfer that is traditionally that good of a wedge player or like an elite putter in these type of events. Because to me, it's like, all right, if everyone is going to be good at it, let's look at some of those other stats where they can gain a bigger edge. That's kind of my way of looking at it. I'm kind of curious as to your thoughts there.
So that's how I always went about it, but I've decided to scrap that mentality this year. Just looking back at the winners, like they all have like no bad. The only like quote unquote bad putter that's ever won here is Dustin Johnson, and he's actually a pretty good putter. Like even to go back and look at it, like last year Chris Kirk. Like if you were to say what are the few things that Chris Kirk does well, he hits his wedges well. He has a great short game, and he makes a ton of putts. And he has won at Honda as well, which I think is something that you can kind of lean into. Although Honda's kind of weird because distance actually does mean a ton at Honda. Although you wouldn't think that being only a par 70, you just have to avoid the water. People always lean on accuracy at PGA National, where if you can hit a little bit longer and keep it dry, you have such a massive advantage at that course. But a lot of the par fives and some of the longer par four and short par fours end up becoming 3-shot ones. Like when Chris Kirk beat Eric Cole in that playoff, he has to scramble out from behind a tree. What does he do? He gets himself to 130 out and sticks it to 2 feet. Like I do think that there are players who are superior wedge players. Someone like Justin Thomas and Colin Morikawa being at the very top of that list. Hence why you've seen Thomas win here before when he could actually putt, which he can't do anymore, and why Morikawa gags it away because he can't putt. But Spieth, Patrick Reed, Cameron Smith, like these are not, you think with the length, you'd want these prodigious drivers, but I think we all have that Dustin Johnson year etched in our mind where he was driving par fours. Be like, oh, well, there's the skeleton key. But that just so rarely happens. He got lucky with the win that year that he's like, yeah, I'll just bombs away at this. It'll be fine. But a lot of shorter hitters end up winning here. And the only way they can really do that, in my mind, is good iron play, but extreme wedge play and extreme putting. And I do think that's why we saw, Chris Kirk being the one who won last year, but I do think that we're going to see a trend of these guys from the back end competing because that's what they're actually good at, where you stick them at the U.S. Open and they're going to be absolute dog shit.
Yeah, I would say that's fair there. For me, I guess I'm not going in off of like bad putters per se, but like if a guy's like middle of the field putting wise, I don't really care. Like that's not going to change my opinion on him. But no, that does make sense. I like the points that you played out. One thing that we didn't really touch on thus far, you kind of mentioned it there, is the wind. We have noticed that like Thursday is the only day in which it could be kind of windy, like 15 plus mile per hour winds. And then from there, it should be pretty good. But obviously, that's something that could change there in Hawaii, being kind of that seaside course. That's like an independent variable that we just don't know yet if it is actually going to make a difference on Sunday or Saturday. It could. Right now, it doesn't look like that. And so, to me, that also does bring more of the field into play, kind of like you just mentioned there.
Of course, yeah, like you said, I'm on the Windfinder right now. I'll have the link in the newsletter when I send that out. I'm using the Windfinder Maui/Honolulu Bay Windfinder tower, and you're right, yeah, gusts up to 21 miles per hour on Thursday with like consistently around 15 to 20. So that's a pretty windy day. It gets a little bit less on Friday, like 10 to 15 throughout the course of the day. And remember, being a small field, that all the golfers will be right around on the course at the same time. There's not going to be a huge wave advantage for anyone. But Saturday and Sunday look like maybe the two greatest days you could ever be anywhere. It's like 80 degrees with 3-mile-per-hour winds in Hawaii.
Right, like the whole field's going to be excited to play on Saturday and Sunday, as opposed to some other years where it's windy. They might not be in contention. They're just like, get me done with this. No, everyone's going to be excited to play, which is a nice thing. I mean, we look at like the Sony Open and the STOC. Like those are two tournaments where, if you're not playing all too well, if you're not in contention, you might just be, trying to get back to the resort.
Yeah, I'm actually that's why there's two reasons why we start the one and done at the Sony. One is, people don't even know this tournament is going on right now. Like, you're very casual golf fan. That it's the same thing that I've mentioned about the best ball drafts for PGA. Like, if they just started it at Pebble in that bye week between the championship game and the Super Bowl, I just feel like it would fill so fast and you can make it so much bigger because people are looking for something to do. No one's actively looking for something to do on January 2nd when football's still going on.
I was thinking about that, and I think that's a great call. Like, you could have the sickos like us that are going to do it regardless, have that in there. Maybe even like do a kickoff event for like the Players Championship, like that, have that be the first event, because that'll draw a big crowd in there and that'll get people excited. Now it's a little bit too removed from, the NFL season, but it's kind of the nice part of the whole, like, kind of sports year, if you will. Like March Madness is going around. on around that time and just a bunch of stuff going on around that time, I kind of think that would be the better move.
Yeah, they did a very successful majors draft last year where you had to draft for the Masters and then move on to the PGA Championship with nothing in between. That seemed to be pretty successful. Those drafts were really fun to do because they had an element of strategy to them that was a little bit different. But I just think trying to capitalize on the people that are still lingering around the site only for football, that you could maybe catch them in if you do it. Yeah. They are running another contest. I think it's like $10,000 to first place for a season-long league that starts at Waste Management. I think that's a good idea, but I think that should have been the big contest, not this one.
I'm right there with you for sure. I mean, the Waste Management is another pretty popular tournament there as well. We're drawing a lot more kind of casual golf fans or just sports fans in general. It already gets a lot of hype. And so I'm actually, that's a great call there. I like that a lot. And maybe we can talk them into that because I would rather do that. Honestly, this early season stuff too, it just leads to a lot more randomness. Like best ball draft wise, we're choosing players that really in the middle of the season probably aren't going to be playing all too well, especially on the back end half. We're trying to get lucky there. And that's kind of the annoying part as well. Like it's a little bit too big of a season for the best ball drafts where you're really trying to get lucky with those middle portion events, John Deere Classic type events where you really don't know what the field's going to be.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of that has to do. So weirdly enough, like I wrote about this. The link is down in the description right now if you're looking for strategy, and we'll talk it through a little bit later on. But there's a reason that Eric Cole is going as the first pick in best ball drafts now.
It's so crazy to see that because last year I was right there. Like Eric Cole's probably going a little bit too late with the amount of events that he's going to play. And it's just crazy to see him going as high as he is now. I'm kind of not getting there with. I've only done a few drafts, but I'm kind of like I can't get there with Eric Cole this year. Let's find, this year's Eric Cole instead. Let's try to be on that. Let's stick with those, high end golfers that in those events that we need them to play well at. They'll give us, a good top 10 finish. I'm kind of there instead. I know he's going to play maybe 2 more events than some of those other players in his range, but I have been struggling with that one with Eric Cole.
Yeah, I don't have Eric Cole at 1. I have him at 5 in the rankings. Like I have Sung Jae ahead of him because Sung Jae is like South Korean Eric Cole, but is actually better than Eric Cole. But he still goes and plays all these weird events. But just structuring your team, like having. And that's why having it at the Sentry is so weird because it inflates the value of guys like Johnny Vegas and Davis Riley and Patton Kizzire, who are kind of the prototypical guys that will play the Byron Nelson and the John Deere Classic. But you get them for this tournament too, and this is the most valuable tournament of the year because the winning score is going to be like minus 30.
And a lot of those guys are also playing next week or scheduled to play next week. Obviously, we don't have that finalized field. Like Vegas, Patton Kizzire is someone that like you can get late in drafts that I believe is going to play in the Sony Open next week. Again, we typically never know that, but those golfers that are here typically tend to play in that event, especially those type of golfers. Like you can get Siwoo Kim, Tom Kim. Those guys are someone that probably will play next week, which is going to be a good event. And then like Sungjae Im, that's where I'm like, I'm probably getting to Sungjae Im over Eric Cole just to give us that little head start, if you will. And then it's kind of like, all right, let's try to get lucky. That's been more of my approach. Again, I've done limited drafts thus far. I'll probably hammer out 10 today. But that's kind of been more of my approach this year, whereas last year I was really gung-ho about trying to maximize the events played. And then really what I saw, and I don't know if you saw this, but the back-end events that you're really hoping for, a lot of those players maybe didn't play in that or honestly played too well to not play in a lot of those events, which ended up hurting.
Yes, so that becomes a big struggle. Maximizing the events played is still, I think, the number one strategy you can do, but I think it's far more difficult to predict that than I think that some people put out there. Like, I'm still basing my entire strategy around that and trying to find the right guys, but I have gone to the level that you're talking about. Like, I want guys that are good but not too good, which is so counterintuitive to how you should do a fantasy draft.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, obviously, the NFL season just ended where at the start of the season, had you had Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, and Jamar Chase, who were in that kind of winning lineup, like you would have felt pretty good about that. But them having that performance on that specific day, pretty darn random, especially like I tweeted this out. It's like Chase Brown getting injured on the one, which then led to 30 plus points for those said players. Like that's just random variance that's going to occur. You just need to spread out your ownerships to a lot of those players that you want to be on. And really, I think gear your best ball drafts up for that kind of random variance in some of those golfers. Now, sure, you want to be on the correct golfers. You should know which golfers you're targeting, but just spread out your ownerships on them. That's probably something that I didn't do enough of last year, where I'm going to try to do here for the next, 2 days.
Code Mayo at Underdog will get you that deposit bonus of up to $1,000 and get you in those drafts. Even if you live in a non-pick'em state, somewhere like Michigan or Florida, I think you can do. I mean, I don't want to speak for Michigan. I think you can do it in Michigan. In Florida, I know you most definitely can still participate in the actual best ball drafts instead of the pick'em game. So even if you're in a champion state, let's say, for the pick'em game, you can still get that bonus of up to $1,000 with Code Mayo. Introducing to you the TGL presented by SoFi Golf's newest league, live on ESPN and ESPN+. This is a simulator plus real chipping, real grass, and real green league featuring some of the PGA Tour's biggest players like Tiger and Rory and Xander. Only 2-hour matches inside of a stadium and has other sporting elements like timeouts, refs, and overtime. You tee off from real grass into a screen. You might end up in the rough, or sand, real sand, and have to play it back into the screen out of there. After that, they use the technology to drop it by a real green side area plus a real putting surface, getting everyone involved in the contest. This isn't your average Sunday pickup game. To learn more, visit tglgolf.com and tune into the inaugural season beginning January 7th. Keep up. It's golf. For 11 months of the year, staying motivated is not a problem for me. Then December hits, the holidays are around, I'm out of my normal routine, and it becomes a struggle to stay motivated and keeping myself laser focused on work and health and getting exercise in every single day just because everything's so out of whack with my schedule being thrown off. The one thing that I've been doing to make sure that I stay on the right path every single day is waking up and drinking my AG1. I get my essentials for nutrients and supplements every single day, and it just makes me feel so good. It makes me motivated to continue to stay focused on what I need to accomplish every single day, no matter how out of the regular routine that my life starts to get. AG1 is a sponsor of the Pat Mayo Experience, so this holiday season, try AG1 for yourself or even gift it to someone special. It's the perfect time to focus on supporting your body with an easy and surprisingly delicious daily health drink. That's why I'm so excited to be partnering with them. And AG1 is offering new subscribers a free $76 gift when you sign up. You'll get a welcome kit, a bottle of D3K2, and 5 free travel packs inside your first box. So make sure to check out drinkag1.com/mayo to get this offer. That's drinkag1.com/mayo to start your new year off on a healthier note. But we're here to talk about DraftKings, so we'll get into the lineups and try to figure it out right now. Again, I made my model at fantasynational.com. You can hit the description, fantasynational.com/mayo, get you that 20% off so you can build your own models, generate lineups very easily. But at the top, do you like a Xander Collins start? Like Xander Cantlay? Like, who is it that...
Oh, absolutely.
That's
yes.
The one? Okay.
Yes.
So is it, which of the two, or is it all three?
It's, you can do all three. You can fit all three of those in there pretty easily. And yes, you worry about them finishing top 12 instead of top 10. We need those position points. But if we can get one of those two to win, we're maximizing the floor there. Pretty much, we're increasing our floor by being on those three. And then you go on the tail end where we are getting some good value. I'm okay with that. Now, could you do 2 studs and then maybe a mid-tier player and 2 values? Sure. But I think for a kind of build like this, I'm kind of fine going with the top 3 guys. If we want to go Sanjay instead of Cantlay, maybe chase that upside and kind of course history, I'm okay with that. But I do think Xander, Morikawa, to me, 2 players that I am betting outright, I'm kind of okay with that. So
the way I would look, if we try to fill out the rest of this lineup and we go to the bottom of, we have 63.30 per player. We need 3 of them. This is the ultimate jam. We're taking the 3 highest priced players. And in my mind, of these guys, I think that Cantlay comes in by far the lowest owned. And low owned for this tournament will probably be 27% or something like that. But people will be on Xander, people will be on Morikawa. You know that people will be on Sungjae and Justin Thomas as well. So when you go up, you're like, well, if everyone's on those guys, who aren't they playing? Well, they're probably not going to play Ludwig. Then they're probably not going to play Hideki. And they're probably not going to play Hovland. Now, I don't like Hovland anyway, or Finau, so I'm not using them. But I could see myself just making a very easy switch here, just going from Morikawa to Ludwig. instead. And I feel like my lineup is already a little bit different with this style of build in my mind.
Well, yeah, that's exactly it. You start with kind of this is kind of the strategy I tell people to do when they're doing their hand lineup process is start with the lineup that you think is going to be the most optimal, and then just make some slight changes from there. So doing exactly what you just said. All right, Colin Morikawa is probably going to be one of the more chalky players. Let's go to a player like O'Bear. Son James going to be pretty chalky. Well, then, yeah, let's try to get to Patrick Cantlay instead and do it that way. Now, naturally, when you do that, you're going to start to get down to some of those really good mid-tier plays that people like, and so that's really going to be my strategy this week as well. As just because it is a week in which you probably need to get a little bit less ownership, and that could be the deciding factor between like a lineup that you really like and don't like. Just really trying to gain an edge on that ownership instead.
So who do let's say we were to fill out this lineup. Now we have 64-33 per player. You said that you like Johnny Vegas, right?
Yeah, I like Johnny Vegas. If he does show up and play well, which I think he has a good chance to do that. Really good staff fit for me this week, but he's someone that can go out and score when he's hot as well. So he could be someone that does provide that kind of GPP winning upside, but also, I think he'll have at least 2 good rounds for us as well. So I think he'll be able to score and have a nice floor. Really, for me, what I'm looking for at this level of price tag is someone that can outproduce their price tag, 1, but 2, finish in the top 50% of the field. And I think he'll be able to do that in terms of fantasy score.
So the one guy I was actually looking at, weirdly enough, was Bryce Garnett, only because it's very hard to comp this course to anything. Like they're the biggest greens on tour. It's one of the longer courses, but it doesn't actually play that way. It actually weirdly has a resort course type feel to it. If there's one guy who has been excellent. I mean, Bhatia kind of showed this last year in his first appearance at this course. A guy who played well in Puerto Rico and a guy who plays well in Dominican Republic. Won a tournament on the Corn Ferry Tour in Panama on those slow paspalum greens. Now, this is Bermuda, but these probably are the slowest greens that players are going to find in regular rotation on tour. Garnett just always shows up at those tournaments, and I don't know why. He just putts really well on slow greens. I don't know if I would exactly want him, but he's also someone who did some damage at Honda in the past and some of those short wedge type events. I don't know if he's so past his prime that it makes any difference at this point, and the putting's been really bad for him, but I know that no one is going to play him. Is that a bridge too far for you?
No, actually, I like that call out a decent amount. Actually, if you're going for the minimum price there, like I'm looking at the other names there, I like that thought process there. Like Mr. Alternative Event, secondary event here, he just dominates those events, like you mentioned. It's weird. You can just bank on that. I like that thought process a lot. I think that's a sneaky good play there. I mean, now that we're mentioning it, maybe not as much sneaky, but I like that. I mean, players that I was looking at instead of that, I think Panik Kazire is someone that could be a good staff and really pop up there. I'm okay with that. I think Kevin Yu kind of fits the same mold as Jonathan Vegas, maybe a little bit more of a GPP risk where he's a little bit more hit or miss, but he's a good staff and he's a guy that can go and score. But I think that's a good sneaky play. The player that I actually like the most is Nico there. Price a little bit higher. Obviously, if we're doing that exact build, we probably won't be able to fit him in there. But it's just going back to that fall form. He was playing really well there. That's not something we can really bank on. But I do like the fact that he has some course experience here as well, with a top 30 place finish last year. Not great, but not terrible there as well. So he's someone that's not a bad staff. I would rather get there, but $500 cheaper for Bryce Garnett. Again, like the finishing positions doesn't really matter. Maybe he finishes top 25. I'm okay with that.
So you could have Bryce Garnett, or, I mean, just listen to these results. So this player a year ago had, let's see here, I believe 17 missed cuts last year. In the events that he did not finish with a missed cut, he was 20th, 18th, 14th, 9th, 13th, and 1st. And it's Rafael Campos who actually fits into that only plays well in the alternate events type mode or at really short courses, it seems.
Yeah. Yeah. That's ugly. I don't like that.
Hey, listen, you don't need, you can take the gloves off even though it's the first time on the show. You can be like, Pat, that's the worst idea I've ever heard. That's fine. I'm going to mix him in just because, I have faith that he can make putts on slow greens.
I mean, I don't hate the thought process there. It's just something that I think is a little bit too ugly. Like, sure, if this was a secondary event, I'd be like, all right, yeah, I like that. But no, I'd rather go with these golfers that are, to me, a little bit better stat fits that also do play well in those kind of secondary events, those events that we're going to be chasing that also are good. I don't hate that. I'm not getting there, though. I would rather go with some of the other players already mentioned to me. Those are going to be easier clicks. At the same time, limited field event, who cares? Like, which players on the low end that you're maybe getting more of than the field. Like at the end of the day, whatever, plan for that variance, find reasons to go towards that variance. I'm okay with that type of thought process.
All right. All I needed was a little bit of justification. Now I can do it. So it's a green
Was
light.
that enough?
It's a green light for me to start my builds with Garnett and Campos and see what I can do. Probably don't even. I'll just leave 3,000 on the table and make sure my team is super different after that. Your Nico Echeverria calls are really good too because I think he actually fits that same mold. You put this guy in mainland continental USA, he's absolutely terrible. You get him in Puerto Rico, you get him in Japan, you get him wherever, he's actually pretty good. So, and like you said, a top 30 last year, and he's only 6,500. The issue becomes with this lineup that we're building right now. If you put Vegas and Echeverria in it, you need to have 6,400 or less. Like, who do you fill this lineup out with? Is it like you said, you like Kevin Yu? I can't get there because he just sucks at putting. Yeah. So I'd want to take like a prolific putter if I was going to go down there. What do you know about Matt McCarty, who won during the swing, won a bunch of times on KFT last year? Like, he's a very interesting, not only play this week, he's a nice best ball pick, I think, because he'll have to play those weirdo tournaments, but he still gets himself into this one in a birdie fest at the same time. Like, do you think he's someone who can do some damage, or is he someone who is good against mediocre competition?
So I haven't looked at ownership just yet. To me, he's the one that, other than Nico, I think will be the highest owned, because I think, again, people like us like that kind of name value, and he's someone that maybe because of that win and because of that name value that he has, playing extremely well, maybe not on the PGA Tour, but other places, I think he could be a little bit higher owned than I would like. But again, I haven't looked at it just yet. I don't look at that until really tail end of today. I don't mind it. Like, again, like ownership as a whole this week, it will probably be high anyways. I'm fine with it. Like, I would rather get to Kevin Yu, because I do think, like you said, no one's going to want to play him. That's kind of my thought process there, and he's a scorer. But to me, that's the simple click, honestly, is McCarty there in that range. Like, that's the easy option. And so, like, yeah, that'd be the way I would go. But do I want to? Because I think it'll be a little bit more popular. That's kind of my issue.
Yeah, I think
I might be overthinking it there.
No, but I think in a small field tournament like this, like if you have all things being equal and you rate players exactly the same, you're like, I don't really know. They could do well. They could come in dead last. Just inherently taking the guy who's less popular, I think makes the most sense if you're trying to win a large DFS tournament.
And that's honestly been my thought process with him at the start of the week, is that I see the name, I think he's naturally going to be a little bit higher owned, and so that's probably already creating like a weird bias in my brain to like him as much as I probably should be. But that's kind of where I'm at.
The two I would probably go for if you're actually shooting for legitimate contenders and upside. I mean, maybe I'm just biased towards Hadwin, but it's $6,200 in a wedge chipping and putting competition. Seems like a pretty good price for him. And he's had a lot of West Coast success in his career. I know this isn't just West Coast, it's beyond the West Coast, but he can fill it up. And Pavon is the other one that I was just surprised was so cheap at 61. Like, he tore through this part of the schedule massively last year. Obviously, he didn't get himself into this tournament, but starting next week at last year's Sony is really when his season took off. Then he wins like 2 weeks later. I don't know if he's going to be able to recapture that. That was a flash in the pan, but he was good on the DP World Tour. He comes over, he gets his card, he gets himself into this tournament. Hell, I think he came top 5 at the US Open last year. Like, he seems to be a different class, at least of upside type player, than the rest of these guys down here. Like, I like Kazire, I like Riley. Malnati's a fun story, but he seems like a real dude.
I don't know. I would argue, like, if you're chasing like victory upside, I'd rather just go with like Nick Taylor, who's someone that when he finds himself in contention, which rarely happens, he can come through with the victory. I guess I'd rather go with that approach than rather kind of, I mean, obviously we're down in this range. We're trying to get lucky regardless. I don't really see it there with Pavon. He has had, fine form, for a guy that is this low price, and we don't really care about the form. He obviously has had to do with the travel being, obviously this being a Hawaii event, he has to do with that nuance a little bit more than maybe this American golfers that are just playing in the United States. So maybe that makes him a little bit more acclimated. Maybe that points to the success that he had, at the Sony Open at the start of the season last year. I haven't gotten there. I really have just looked at him and looked past him.
Yeah, and even to look at what he played in the Hero, he was second to last in the Hero. But even during his DP World Tour schedule, like, he didn't end up qualifying for the DP World Tour Championship. Didn't finish anything better than T40 in any of his 4 DP starts. Now, he played Wentworth, he played in Spain, he played the Dunhill Links, and he played L'Open de France, sponsored by the FedEx. And in his home event, he finished T57 in that event. So it wasn't great for him, but I just see him as a better class of player as some of these other guys. I guess what we're finding out here is I think you, instead of going like the Vegas, Echeverria, Pavon route, or Riley or Kazai or whoever it might be, that you're probably better off. Like, I would rather punt with Garnett and then get slightly more money to get up like $300 more. Because I really do think that, like, once you get, like, you like Echeverria, that's great. But once you get above him and you're into like Hoagie and Dietrich and Straka and Jagger and even Harry Hall, I feel like those guys are significantly better and safer.
Yeah, that's fair. I actually like Harry Hall a decent amount this week. I think he's a kind of a sneaky kind of dark horse, if you will, maybe even to potentially win, but to like top 10. So I don't mind that approach. I think that's fine. And that's where you could just naturally, all right, I don't like the lineup here. Let's get off of Patrick Cantlay. Let's go down to someone else. I think that's fine. But I am kind of curious about, you mentioned you liked Brian Harman, Sam Burns. I am kind of curious as to what your kind of favorite, like, fair and balanced build would be.
I guess that's probably the way to do it, because I'm finding that these lineups, maybe it's because we went to the almost ultimate extreme with the lineups up top, that like if you just take Cantlay out and turn him into Sam Burns, then you have so much more money to play with that your back end looks pretty good. But one thing I have noticed about, you know, between my good weeks and my bad weeks, and I was fire basically through the high. I won 5 GPPs from between the Sony and Honda last year, and then I didn't even come close again the rest of the season. But you're playing for that upside, and those lineups were just filled with like uncomfortable decisions, and the lineups didn't look like, when I built them, I was like, this doesn't look so great. And then those are the ones that end up getting to the top. So I do think there is something to that. But I think I would probably try to start with whoever it is I like the most at the top. I think I like Xander the most. I don't think I'm going to be alone on that. So I'm going to say, let's start our lineups with Patrick Cantlay, who I don't have rated all that much lower than Xander and has played pretty well at this tournament in the past. And I do trust his putter more than someone like Morikawa or even Ludwig or Justin Thomas. Obviously, he's not Xander, but he's also over $1,000 cheaper. So it gives us more to play with in terms of a balance build. From there, I would go with Burns. I like Akshay, and I love Thigala. So we'll throw those guys into it. Now we're back down to that Harry Hall range once again. So maybe we drop Bhatia down to someone else, like someone like Wyndham Clark, for example. I guess he's only $100 less, but I think that's sort of the balance build that I would try to go with, or even take Cantlay out and put Wyndham Clark in to save a bit more money to get me like Harman and Henley. That might end up working. Let's see, Clark, Burns, Bhatia, Thigala. You got $7,350 left for each of the players. You can go with, let's see, Horschel's down there. Horschel's played this course awfully throughout the course of his career. Harry Hall, we both liked. We'll throw Harry Hall back in. We get to $7,900, and you got Cam Smith. Poston is one that I do really like, so we can try him. We can try Harman. We could throw Harman in and leave some money on the table. That's the sort of balance build. Maybe not necessarily those 6 guys, but that idea of just don't even worry about the very, very top guys. Because if you end up taking them, you end up with the guys at the very bottom. So your theory on the tournament would have to be that, maybe Xander gets there, but the guys that you have to have with him to get there would have to be the Burns, the Bhatias, the Wyndham Clarks, and that level of player, and you simply cannot afford those guys without playing Bryce Garnett or Campos. And those guys just don't even sniff an optimal lineup, thus taking Xander out of the mix, that it's better to go off this way.
Yeah, and again, like with the field being a little bit limited in terms of like the star power, if you will, with Rory, Scotty not being there, we really have, to me, like 3 studs. Cantlay, Morikawa, and then Xander. If you want to toss in, let's say, Sungjae into that mix, you could. But at the same time, that also reduces the likelihood that a stud is going to go out and potentially win this event. So that does open up for a little bit more of the random results in there. So maybe 1 stud, but to your point, like if they, let's say, top 10 finish, like that might not be enough. And so I do like the idea of, mixing it up a little bit. I probably still want to get 1 stud at least to capture maybe the top 5, but I'm fine with that. One player that you didn't mention in the mid-tier that I think is a great GPP option is Taylor Pendrith. He was someone that was playing great golf at the tail end of the season, good stat fit. He's someone that I think can show up, but I do feel like Harman is like a simple click down in that range. And then Harry Hall, I think, is a good like GPP upside play, but Harman just feels like the more the week has progressed, the more I've bought into him, even though he might not be popping up on like paper as much as me, but this is going back to it. This is where you do a little bit more manual stuff than a little bit, or than a normal week there. So that's kind of where I'm getting to as well, mid-tier wise.
Yeah, so I mean, we didn't talk. I think that Harry Hall was going to end up being exceptionally popular because I mean, I ran my stat model and he came out number 1. That's not good. But I mean, that's enough to tell me. What does that tell me? It tells me that he's been playing a lot. He's been playing easier courses, and he's been playing against weak competition. Now, if you only ran his, I mean, he doesn't get to play in elevated events, so you would never know how he actually does against these guys. So I think that there's that level of stat that you need to kind of take out of it too. It's not that he didn't hit those shots and make those putts. It's just relative to the field he was playing in, he didn't have to be as sharp because he wasn't playing with the best players in the world. So I still like him here, but I do think that optimizers will try to jam him in. Paul and I have been talking about it all week, and we bet him. Like, I love Nick Dunlap here. He might come dead last. That's fine. But I've seen him now win 2 of this style of tournament. And weirdly enough, when his irons get really hot, his putter comes along with it. It's either a complete disaster across the board or he's so hot he's awesome. So at $7,200, like, he's a guy who won twice in his rookie year. I think he could just go up and light this place up.
I'm looking at it now, and for the top stats that I have, he ranks top 15 or better in 3 of those in the field. And so Nick Dunlap is typically a player that I am just not on. So I was not on him for his victories. That's just kind of my approach. I don't like to go with those guys where we don't have, a good sample size on. That's just, again, I'm more risk averse in that sense. I would not talk anyone out of that play. I think that makes a lot of sense there. Again, not a play that I get to. That's not kind of my style, but I don't hate that.
So the other guys from this range that I would be targeting, I know that Austin Eckroat has been a popular name floated around, and I completely understand. It actually makes a ton of logical sense. Like I mentioned Honda already, he won there. Where else has he won? Well, he just won in Mexico at a course that has super slow greens and has the second largest greens on tour behind Kapalua. That makes a ton of sense to me, and his wedge game is absolutely top-notch. The problem with him is, I think he's a better outright bet, potentially, than a DraftKings play or even a top 10 type bet. It's just his putter can go so cold, so fast. Like his upside on the greens is not that large. He's going to need to stick everything. And the quality of competition that he's playing this week is so much higher than what we saw in the 2 tournaments that he won that I think that he needs to be even more precise with his wedge play. And I don't know if his putter can come along for the ride.
And for me, he kind of falls into a player that's talk about like taking a deep breath, kind of relaxing coming into a season. I feel like that's more him, especially coming in off of a recent victory. To me, this is kind of a natural regression for him spot. And kind of looking at his price tag, DFS wise, I can't really get there. Just there's other players that are a little bit lower that I think can score just as much as him. And there's other players that are slightly above him that I think have more winning upside. Example, like Brian Harman.
Yeah, Brian Harman is there. I mean, we haven't talked about Matt Fitzpatrick, but no one is going to click next to his name. I believe he was top 5 at this tournament last year. And he's been bad for a year, but maybe he is the ultimate reset guy. Like when you just scan the names on this list in terms of the DraftKings pricing, $7,500, Maverick McNeely, Alex Noren, Bezadenhout, Jake Knapp is 73. Matt Fitzpatrick is 72. So is Horschel. Eckroat's at 71. Homa, McCarthy, Kirk, Zalatoris. Like Matt Fitzpatrick won the U.S. Open 2 years ago. Like he should theoretically be $8,700 in this field. Now, he has not played like that, but if you just think new year, it's a reset. He got his game back together. Maybe he just needed some time off. The talent gap between him and everyone else in this tier is like non-existent. It's so wide you can't even measure it.
I can 100% buy that, and this is kind of one of those players where I haven't been able to get to thus far this week, but I'm haven't done as many lamps as I typically would throughout the middle of the season with NFL going on. But I probably will get to him a little bit more, trying to chase that upside because again, laying out what you just said, I think that makes perfect sense. Name value wise, it's there, and it's not like he's played this course poorly, and he kind of fits the mold of a player that would play this course well as well. Like the fact that he has course experience, and it's kind of crazy. Like if you simple it down, like let's say Harman, Fitzpatrick, you go name value, like you're already capturing that upside a decent amount there. And they're priced so cheap. That's the weird part about this week. We have so many kind of historically elite golfers that people were on a bunch last year. Cameron Young, for example, that are pretty cheap. And there's a little bit of sticker shock. They're really a testament to the DK Pricer like over the past year and a half now, whereas like 2 years ago, all those players would have been probably $1,000 more expensive just because of the name value.
Yeah.
Well, there was one player down there.
Ooh, hit me.
Go ahead.
I was going to say Denny McCarthy.
Oh, no.
Denny McCarthy fits everything you want at this course. I mean, he's probably not going to close, but he's only $7,000.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. But Max Homa is right around that price tag, and I'm curious if you know anything more than I do with this. So he's someone that I think would be a good play, but I don't know if you saw the rumors with him. Like there's no like Titleist sponsor anywhere around him when he was like doing warm-ups, I think yesterday at the course. And so there's like rumors that he's like switching to Cobra. Like, I don't know. Have you seen anything about that? Because to me, that does worry me when a golfer switches brands. Maybe it's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing, but I don't know. That comfortability of like switching clubs, that always like gets me a little bit worried about a player.
Yeah, I don't know. I was just going to put a big X through his name anyway. Like when I was talking to people at the President's Cup, it wasn't like all roses about Max Homa and his ability to turn it back around. And even when he played a little bit in the swing, like he missed the cut at the tournament he won back-to-back years in Napa. Now maybe he just went for a wine weekend. I don't know. It's hard to judge. But if you're going to show up and you've won the tournament twice, just to miss the cut outright is pretty strange and like badly missed the cut. Then he plays the Zozo. It's a no cut. He plays okay there. He was T14 at the Nedbank. Like he went to South Africa, a tournament he had won the year previously. And he finishes T14 against like Burmeister, Corey Connors, Mac Hughes, and a bunch of dudes I've never heard of from South Africa. So it's not pointing up for him right now. And I don't judge him. Like, I like Homa. I hope he has the big comeback. But if we're talking about two guys in that range, I do think that, like, yes, Fitzpatrick had, I would say as equally as bad of a year as Max Homa. But I also think that Fitzpatrick's just the superior player overall, that I'd just rather click his name.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, Fitzpatrick's kind of the player that you would expect to have a bounce back year, especially with that whole driver stuff that we talked about in the middle of the season. I could really see how that would kind of change his whole season outlook. Honestly, just having something weird like that going on where you're not sure what's going on with the driver. You think you're doing everything right, and it turns out there's just a weight in there. And I could see how that would really, even once you figure it out, kind of delay the success that you might have had. And so this, again, does feel like a natural reset spot for him. But you could say that for Max Homa as well. You could say, all right, kind of a down year last year. Granted, we know that was going to happen most likely with Max Homa. We know he's not kind of that consistently doing well in majors type of player. But at 7.1 to get a guy that's played this course that decently well, like if we get a top 15 place finish out of him with some scoring in there, it's not the craziest thing to see him top 10. And if you're saying that you don't like him, I'm like, all right, let's get that ownership lower, and then maybe I can think about it.
Yeah, listen, feeding my picks is usually a winning strategy when it comes to anything. So that's probably the angle that you do want to take. So the lineup that I've constructed now, I took Pendrith out of it and put Fitzpatrick in, and that saved me enough money to get back up to Cantlay. So the lineup would look like Morikawa, Cantlay, Harman, Grazerman, Dunlap, and Fitzpatrick. I think that's contrarian enough. It leaves a little bit of money on the table, and I think that by using Cantlay as one of the two studs, I think it does get me off of a lot of the very common builds. I don't know how much I like this lineup, but it all features plays that theoretically I do like, so why not?
And honestly, that would be like the biggest message for like the early season. It's like you really shouldn't like your lineup too much this like early on in the season. If you really do like it, you're probably doing something a little bit wrong because there's no reason to overly like a lineup. So honestly, feel a little bit uncomfortable would actually make me feel pretty good about it. And looking at that roster construction specifically, it wouldn't be shocking to see that type of roster construction be the GPP winning lineup. You know, 2 studs, 2 mid-tier plays, and then 2 kind of lower price plays.
But one of the things that you're seeing again, now that we've put in 2 of the higher end guys, is that people just miss out on the Burns, Bhatia, Clark, Connors, Theegala, Finau, Hovland, like that tier from like 93 to 87, because it's hard to put those guys in. So, to quote Tambo, who, again, will be back next week in studio with me to break down the Sony Open. Now, it's not about who you play, it's how you play them. So if it's Burns, like if you like Burns, Bhatia, like I do, I like Theegala as well. You like Connors, I like Wyndham Clark, I like all those guys. But it does seem like if you do play those guys, that they all get played together just because of how the pricing works.
No, I don't know if I would do that. I don't know, just given the style of the event, the no-cut event, the limited field event, I don't know if I would actually get there because, again, I want to capture that lower price play, that sub 7K play that is going to give us a top 5 finish that, not as many people are going to be on. I would rather do that than get and like even leave some salary left on the board. I would rather do that, like leave 700, even 1,000. I would almost rather do that to get unique than play 5 players in the 8K range in a no cut event.
Oh,
Can that work out? It can, but
I guess my point more to that was like I think if you're gonna play like a Burns or a Clark, I think they just get played like regardless of whether it's a good play or bad play. I just think they get played together a lot because it would be one stud and then into that level with 2 of those guys, and then everyone kind of builds like unless you really go dumpster diving because you have to. The bottom end of a lot of people's golf DraftKings lineups look very similar. It's all the same: Harry Hall, Brian Harmon, Nico Echeverria, whoever like the popular guy becomes down, those become the last 3 guys, and then you figure out how to manipulate your top end. What I'm saying is that if you go to that range, that you're probably going to get 2 of them together, be it Burns and Bhatia, or Connors and Theegala with a Xander, or a Colin, whereas if you play Cantlay and Xander, you just simply cannot get to that range.
Gotcha. No, that makes more sense, but I still think I would rather just get one of those guys mostly than 2. Is kind of in that 8K to like 9.3K range. I think that's the approach I would rather go with because you really, I feel like we're limiting the upside. It sounds weird. I think we're limiting the upside of the build by placing too many of those guys in a lineup together. Now, could they both, finish 1 and 2? Sure. I have not seen that to be the most profitable approach with these no-cut events. Is the biggest takeaway I have is like every single time I do a fair and balanced approach with these no-cut events, I regret it pretty much most of the time. Now that's not every time. Obviously, we're not playing in absolutes ever, but that's kind of been my approach.
So let's try this then. So this is what I wanted to get to of how do you play them together and what's going to look like a common build if you end up playing 2 of those guys. Now, I like that. I do want to build out like 1, 4, or 5 of the AK guys and then like do a 5-1. Not necessarily stars, but like, B-level stars, the intercontinental champions of this event, along with an absolute loser to see how that works. Because I just think that's the most unique way that you can build a lineup this week, and I'm okay with going with that even if it fails. So let's take Morikawa out of this. We'll have Cantlay as our top-end guy, and we'll take Grazerman out of it. Now it gives us $91.50 left to spend. Cantlay, Harmon, Dunlap, and Matt Fitzpatrick. And we can go Burns at 9. And you could go Hovland, but we both said we don't like Hovland. We don't like Finau. Let's throw in Wyndham Clark. Actually, I like Theegala into this one. So we can go with Theegala. That gives us 700. We can get Fitzpatrick back up to that 79 with Davis, Thompson, Siwoo. Don't love that level. We could get Harmon up to Adam Scott or Max Grazerman. Do you like Grazerman more than you like Harmon? Just 1v1, take pricing ownership out of it?
I don't know. Like I feel like Harmon, if he does find himself in contention, he's going to be more likely to win. So in that sense, I like Harmon a little bit more for the upside, but I do think it's more likely that we see the Grazerman form continue. And so I think it's more likely that we get a, let's say, top 10 finish out of Grazerman. But if Harmon is showing up in contention, I do think it's more likely that he ends up winning. So I would say just get both of them. I think those are both great options. Obviously, Harmon being a little bit cheaper, leaving some salary left on the board could be a way to get unique. I would probably say that approach, but I think both of those would be the correct answer in my eyes.
Okay, so let's take Burns down to Wyndham Clark. So now we can make it work. We go Cantlay, Clark, and
what is it about Clark that you like?
Wedges.
I don't like him as much.
Wedges and putting. Like, I've just seen him go nuclear so many times on the greens that this is the perfect type of event for him to do that. And the one part of his game where he really lost his way last year when his stats started to dip was he lost all the accurate. It's not even that he was an accurate driver. It's just he was horrible. Like, Max Homa is the absolute nut low of driving at this point. He's just driving it out of bounds every single time. Clark is just losing his shot. Like, he gets himself double crossed all the time. He's trying to play a cut. He plays a fade instead. But you can get away with that at Kapalua because the fairways are like 50 yards wide. Like, you can miss with your driver and still be fine. His long irons are still awesome. His wedge game is elite. He's a great short game player, and he can fill it up. And I do think of all these top end guys, he's the one guy that no one is going to.
Myself included. That's why I wanted to ask. So I'm not going to argue the reasons that you just had there. I think that's fine. To me, it sounds weird. I see Corey Connors there, and to me, he's. And again, I'm more of a guy that likes to chase more of the safety first and then go with upside. And so to me, it's like I see Corey Connors there. You mentioned you like Theegala a lot. I like Sam Burns a lot. To me, I'm like, all right, I would rather get to those guys. But based off of kind of what you've been saying is going to be your approach this week, I think that's fine. Like that makes perfect sense. Like targeting a lot more of those type of golfers, a little bit lower owned. And I mean, Clark is someone that I think at this point, if he finds himself in the mix, will still find himself in the mix on the back nine of Sunday. Like coming into Sunday, if he's in contention, I don't think he's really going to lose that. Will he win? Maybe not. We'll see. But I can get behind that.
Yeah, and just where if Wyndham Clark had been priced at 8,100 in this field or even 7,400, I could have seen that happening. It's just his price is so weird to me that I know that people will not be clicking those options. Like the difference, it's funny, like Corey Connors, I could just see betting top 5 every week, top 10 every week. But I'm playing for max upside. So maybe it does depend on tournament selection. Like, is Connors the better play in a single entry or a 3 max or a limited field tournament? Yeah, he probably is. But if you're going to play in anything with like more than 2,000 people in it this week, you're going to find so few ownership discounts on anyone that what would you say the chances, like, I would say probably the top 5 equity between the two. Like, there's obviously a gap that Connors would probably be better than Wyndham Clark in that. But if we're talking about winning this tournament, I bet you Wyndham Clark's like, and maybe I'm just thinking about it objectively or subjectively, sorry. I'm not thinking about it statistically because I'm sure that a data model and even our fantasy national simulator would have them probably about equal. But in my mind, like, Wyndham Clark's not necessarily a Ricky Bobby, but when he's in contention, we've seen him win. And Connors doesn't do that.
Yeah, no, and that's the difference there. And I think you nailed it. Like, yeah, if you're doing more single entries, maybe a little bit less. And that's kind of how my brain works first, is like more single and then to massive or GPPs, the bigger contest. And so in that sense, I do think you kind of nailed it. Like, yes, Wyndham Clark, if he does find himself in contention, has a little bit more of a likelihood to win. Kind of, again, going back to Brian Harman, like that's kind of why I like him maybe a little bit more than some of the other players in that range. Is I think he can go out and win more so if he finds himself in contention. Again, going back to Graceman versus Harman, I think this is basically the exact same thing here with Connors and Wyndham Clark. So I can get behind that, especially in a more or in a higher field event.
So let's do that then. Let's take Wyndham Clark out for the final build that we're going to do, the build that you hate the most, but it's the way that I'm going with it this week. And we could even squeeze someone else. Actually, you could probably squeeze in Wyndham Clark into this as well if we just drop Harman down. It's just funny that it worked out so well with Harman. And we'll go with Hoagie. So you can go Connors, Burns, Thigala, Henley, Wyndham Clark, and Tom Hoagie. Or you could take Henley out, play Grazerman instead, and upgrade Hoagie to Harry Hall if you wanted to. I just don't think you're going to see a lot of these lineups. And Hall, I think, could be interchanged with Eric Cole very easily. I mean, Eric Cole's going as the number 1 pick in best ball, yet no one seems to want to play him this week.
Yeah, that's been one of the weirdest things thus far with the few best ball drafts that I've done. It's like the players that people are drafting or maybe should be drafting are not players I'm really clicking on this week as well. It's definitely a funny thing. Like Russell Henley, for example. It's just kind of funny.
I mean, Russell Henley, in theory, should be really good at this course. It's just he hasn't been.
And I know we're still with this, not jumping to best balls just yet, but like for best balls as well, should be a higher pick to be than what he's going as. But I mean, that's the thing this week. It's like you need to be different. Just how different do you go down that road? It's like you can make your kind of first build, maybe a little bit optimal build, but you do need to get unique. You need to get uncomfortable with your lineup approach this week. That's kind of the theme at the start of the season. And really in a no-cut event with the limited field event, that should be what you're trying to gear up for.
I can see myself playing a lot of variations of the lineup that we have up right now. That 1 9K, like Burns at 9,000, 4 8K guys, and then someone in the 6s, or try to fudge around the margins a little bit. Like I just played that one, the one that I played without Grazerman and up to Henley. You take Grazerman out, you put Henley in, and then you have Brian Harman as the back end of this. Nick Dunlap is right there as well. Actually, Henley doesn't work. This one has to work with Connors instead of Clark. But like that style of lineup, I just think it's so hard to actually like go through this and click on that it becomes pretty tough for people. That I just think that this is a unique lineup, and the bet that you're making is that the 3 best players in the field don't win. And maybe they don't even come inside the top 3. It's a long shot to happen, but winning a giant GPP is a long shot too.
Yeah, and that's the theme. It's like you need to not like it as much this week. The lineups that you're going to be on, it needs to be a little bit ugly. And I probably am chasing more of the studs personally, but at the same time, there needs to be lineups as well that are going to be uncomfortable and not as chased, and maybe more of the, let's say, Cantlay in Burns type of players there on the high end as well. Clark, to your example, core counters type plays as well. It needs to be a little bit uncomfortable.
All right, so those are different variations of DraftKings lineups that you can build this week, and how that ends up playing out. You can go to fantasynational.com/Mayo, get 20% off, sign up, create your lineups that way, and check out the ownership percentage tab as well in order to construct your lineups around that way. The lineup builder tool is super easy. It's not like an optimizer for other sports. Thank God for golf, where everyone is price and a position. You don't have to get unique with combos or anything like that, that you can see and move your pieces around very easily. fantasynational.com/Mayo. That'll do it for part 1 of the Pat Mayo experience. I went so long on the second half with Eric for the best ball show that we decided to make it its own video. Everything will be up together on the audio podcast, so you can get into the free draw by subscribing, rating, and reviewing over there. But I just want to remind you, code Mayo at Underdog, fantasygolfchampionships.com for the one and done, and fantasynational.com/Mayo will get you 20% off all tools, all stats, everything that you need to know. All right, smash the like while you're here, sub to the channel. I'm Pat Mayo, and I will see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!